Thank you all for coming to have a talk to us today. And this is very impromptu, very not disorganised, but we haven't got a plan. And for those of you who haven't met myself or Chloe before, my name's Dr. John Tay, and I'm the Medical Director of PlantMed clinics in Brisbane. And we've been operating since legalisation in 2016. We've got over 3,000 active patients right now, and we've treated a lot more patients than that. And I really feel like Nimbin's a home of mine, interestingly enough. I don't live too far down the road, and medical cannabis came into my mind through this town. We had a lovely friend of ours who's sadly passed now, named Nikki. And she's a family friend of ours, came to us back in 2015 with a serious brain tumour at 21 years old. And she asked us for help. At that stage, cannabis was still completely illegal in Australia. So we lived down the road from Nimbin and we knew about the plant, and we guided her in the direction of Nimbin and helped her out finding some medicine. And then I came across the regulatory roadblocks when cannabis became legalised a year or so later, and I was trying to get her legalised medical cannabis because I didn't know that you couldn't apply to cure someone from cancer, but you can only apply to save them from the symptoms of their treatment or the disease itself. We eventually got her approvals through, but it was delay after delay, and just the injustice of it was what really got me. The fact that this poor young lady can access something, we can access it here in Nimbin, and thank you, Nimbin, for doing that. But, you know, the accuracy of those medicines weren't always the same. Sometimes they were a bit stronger, sometimes they were a different strain. We were never quite sure what we were using. She had great results and had 5 or 6 good years with her family without suffering, but eventually passed. So that's why we're here today. And I had to go.
Thank you, John. So our journey into cannabis was personal. It wasn't a career move for us. It was something that just happened and started. John's father's a surgeon, so once our first patient kind of put her story up, we started getting phone calls to John Tay Sr. And the phones just kept ringing. They didn't stop. They haven't stopped ever since. PlantMed is very clinically led. We're very proud to be clinically led and focus on the patient as an individual. But even to this day, with how much this industry has expanded, we are still seeing on the front lines a lack of clinical care when it comes to treating patients with cannabis medicines. And that's some of the things that people are talking about right now, and that's the things that are leaving really bad tastes in people's mouth, both within the industry and also within the greater medical industry as well. And we just find that's creating a lot of extra red tape and roadblocks for anyone within this space that is trying to do the right thing. So yes, it's a very interesting time in the medical cannabis space, that's for sure.
And I think one of the most important things, and Emily, who talked just before us, mentioned it as well, is just to hang in there. And look, I still feel like I'm 21 years old, but I'm not anymore. And I feel like, you know, time has flown and all of a sudden I'm a veteran in the medical cannabis space when I feel like I've only just started my career in medical cannabis. So the road is long, but we are moving forward. I think that's the big key, is that we are able to help people, and not everyone is as brave as all the people in this room today who can come out against social stigma and come and, you know, put their hand up and say, I believe in this and I'm here to prove that. So, look, I thank everyone for coming today. But we're happy to take questions, really, about anything, about medical problems, about the state of affairs, about the industry. We're both very experienced in this industry, and we haven't had time to keep the statistics, in all honesty, but I'd say 80+% of patients that come through our clinic get a positive result, get a good result, and we see people from autistic children to severe epileptic patients, to people with chronic pain, to people with neurological diseases, people with psychiatric diseases, people with inflammatory diseases, autoimmune diseases, and of course all the damage that's been caused by the other medical practices that have happened in the last few years and have really exacerbated all of the current medical conditions that people have. So I'll open up the floor to questions if there's a mic out there, and let's just start because that'll give us a direction.
And no question's a silly question. It can be
That's right.
medical, it can be about the industry, it can be about, prior to legalisation, whatever.
So if we can just get a mic out there to anyone with a hand up, it'd be great. Do we have a spare mic out there?
I think, where's Kath? She might...
We can swing one of these out if we haven't got one.
Yep. You're all right.
Well, I'll pass it around.
Yeah. Nice.
G'day guys, my name's Shane.
Hi, Shane.
My question is that I'm not against hemp and cannabis because I grew up with it with my family. I have seen what it's done. My mum had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. My sister's gone through it all and all that. So I've never touched it. But I've been diagnosed with severe PTSD. I mean, it's like the top end of it. I'm on medication, which I'm trying to get off. So I'm weaning myself off it because I don't see the benefits in it because I'm actually walking around as a dodo.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
And it's cost me a fortune. Even though I've got a good payout and everything else, I'm paying for it myself. And I've never touched anything. I don't smoke. I don't hardly drink. So that's because of my background and my job I had to do. What would your thoughts be on me trying something? That's why I'm here. I'm up here with a group of mates, and I'm very open to anything. And I was really keen to come and talk to you guys about what you think would be a good avenue for me to go, because I have heard a lot of horror stories,
100%.
and I've heard a lot of good stories. So I want to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, no worries at all. Well, I've got a lot of PTSD patients, and you can get PTSD from all sorts of trauma. It can be from when you're a kid and your parents weren't very nice to you. It can be, from being in a war. It can be from being in a car accident. It can be from going to a hospital too many times and at the hands of doctors have medical PTSD. But for whatever reason, we got to remember balance, and it always comes to that. We're creating balance in your mind again. So PTSD is when you have a thought that creates a physical and emotional response in you that gives you physical symptoms like an increased heart rate, increased breathing, that panicky feeling, I got to get out of there, fear. It's a fear response. So we're breaking down that fear response. And what we're trying to do is increase the parasympathetic nervous system tone. So we've got a nervous system, everyone knows about that. There's a parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So the sympathetic tone will increase when you are running away from that lion. Your parasympathetic tone increases when you're relaxed, when you're well fed, when you're making love and creating and more children. That relaxed state. So we want to bring that back in rather than always being in the sympathetic space, which is what severe PTSD is. So the mainstay of treatment for that in my clinic is definitely high levels of CBD. So you do want to check that your other drugs you're taking aren't going to interact with high levels of CBD. But besides other drugs, CBD is really, really safe to very high levels. So I will be using, just off the top of my head, I haven't got your history and all that, but I'll be using something like 100 or 200 milligrams a day of CBD oral tincture. And I'd spread that in 2 to 3 times a day or a little bit more. So about 100 milligrams twice a day. And then that'll be your mainstay of treatment. I would use a full spectrum CBD, meaning one that has got a little bit of THC in it, one that has got all the terpenes, one that's been taken from the plant naturally, not an isolate, not one that's been over-processed. And that'll be your mainstay of your treatment. Especially with your background, with your mother having schizophrenia, you want to lay off the THC or at least be very light on it. If you've got other comorbidities like sleep problems, pain, or anything else, then I would bring in THC, starting, if you haven't been a smoker before, starting with oral, something oral like a gummy or an oil. And I would use that at night time because the use of the THC at night time will not only help you with your sleep, but it reduces the amount of REM sleep you get and increases the amount of deep sleep you get. And the REM sleep's where you have your dreams and your night terrors. So if they're a thing for you, then that THC will be useful for that. So, but you want to be careful. There's a lot of veterans that will just go gung-ho on the smoke, and that can really be a detriment, especially if you've got mental health in your family. You can trigger that off. So you want to hold back on the THC initially, lots of CBD, a tincture at night time of THC for your oils with your CBD to balance it. And that'll be your basis.
And there's something else I'd like to pop in there is, a lot of the issues we face with side effects, exacerbating mental health issues, schizophrenia, bipolar, these are a result of prohibition. Before prohibition, cannabis was a balanced plant. It had CBD, it had THC. CBD offsets the psychoactive effect of THC. It balances it. So before prohibition, we didn't see these issues because most plants were growing naturally at a ratio of 4 parts CBD to 1 part THC. The reason we have exacerbated mental health is not the cannabis plant's fault. It's what we did with it post-prohibition. It was growing for a psychoactive effect and not a medical effect. When we actually understand what the root cause is of a lot of these mental health issues, we can begin to go back to before prohibition and balance our medicines. Equal parts, or in most cases when we come to mental health, usually 4 parts CBD to 1 part THC to ensure we're not going to exacerbate any of those underlying issues. But generally speaking, cannabis is not to blame. It's the growth process, the strain that was used, and the way it's been prescribed.
So that bounces back to what Emily was talking about as well. It's really high levels of THC. Look, has its place. But for the general population, it's more than you require. And if we were to convert that back to 1970s ratios of CBD and THC, you'd have 10 grams of that flower and you'd need 30 grams or 40 grams of a CBD flower of equal strength to balance it out in a safe ratio. Some studies have been done saying that levels of 4 parts CBD to 1 generally don't cause any anxiety, and levels of 8 parts CBD to 1 generally won't cause any mental health problems at all. It's very safe, and higher levels than that are obviously more safe. So CBD is the mainstay of treatment for PTSD, and CBD is the mainstay of treatment medically. If you're using cannabis medically and you haven't got CBD in the mix, it'll be a very rare situation. In fact, it doesn't happen in my clinic.
It's the yin to the yang. You need both of them in order to create that balance, that homeostasis, and not have further impact on your health. Yeah.
I was going to say, we've got a question up here, and then I'll come to people at the front there. Do you have a question? No. Okay. Sorry, I'm coming up the front.
Hello, my name's Ben. I was just very interested in how you're treating cancer, specifically, not the symptoms of cancer treatment, but actually treating cancer itself.
A good question.
Very good.
So, I've got a very special interest in cancer patients. We have a lot of cancer patients at the clinic, and cancer somewhere where I think it's a good idea to seek some medical advice from someone who does know if you're using cannabis, if you want to do it right. And I suppose talking to my colleagues in the States and also studying from the world experience, I suppose the Rick Simpson's method is one in which I will base my cancer treatment on for what I call remission intent, so try not to die. And we don't have a cure for cancer, but certainly I have seen a lot of positive remissions in our patients, and some cancers are worse than others. But essentially what you do is overload. What I do is overload orally both CBD and THC, and I choose a target level that I've just really picked between cost and ability for people to continue the therapy, because it's something you need to continue ongoing until you get your remission. How long's that? Well, who knows? But basically I'll aim at about 150 milligrams of CBD minimum a day and 150 milligrams of THC minimum a day orally, and I'll do that in divided doses. 3 times a day, so you're constantly dosing yourself. And I'll have the nighttime dose is where you put the significant dosing, because during the day, at those sort of dosing levels or above, you will reach a point where you're like, I'm not functioning very well in the day. And so when you reach that point, you take half a step back and then you load the nighttime. In conjunction with that, if someone smokes or vaporizes, that's fine, more the merrier in that sense. I will also include a carb-free and sugar-free diet. So paleo or keto are the catchphrases, but you don't have to be quite keto or paleo. Just don't eat sugars and carbs and change your metabolism to fat burning. And then I've got a list of supportive supplements that are good cancer and endocannabinoid integration medicines, things like turmeric, frankincense, copaiba, vitamin C, maritime pine bark. So there's a whole list of immune supporting supplements we use as well. And basically you get yourself to that cruising altitude, get your diet sorted, decide what subs you want to take, and then maintain. And then when job's not done, then I check in every 3 months with the patient when they get their oncology scans. We assess those. We assess their blood markers for cancer, depending on the type of cancer, and monitor it. And I always say keep in the good books with your oncologist, because if you don't, you're going to be footing the bills for these scans, and they're very expensive. So that's one little trick, is keep in the good books with your oncology team, even if you don't take any chemo. You can say that to them, and remember, you're your advocate for your own medical journey, and you don't have to take chemo. Well, not that I say you shouldn't, but you don't have to. You don't have to do anything, but you want to tell the doctor what you want, what your outcomes are. I want to maintain my treatment with you. I've tried one round of chemo. I've decided that it's not for me. I just couldn't handle the side effects, and it was just terrible. But I want to maintain your support of me, so that if there are any complications or any treatment that I do need, you can help me out, and they'll also pay for your scans. Then we assess the scans. Once we receive 2-3 month scans of remission on a PET scan. So PET scans show activity, metabolic activity. So they show cancer if it's active, but they'll also show infection and inflammation. But once you've had 2 cancer-free PET scans in a row, we can draw a line in the sand. The patient and I will draw a line in the sand, and we'll reduce the dose down to 20% and maintain their lifestyle changes. So that in a nutshell is cancer. You could go home and treat yourself with cancer with that. And, if you Google cancer, there's a million other things you could probably do as well, but it's not my area of expertise. But this bit is, and that's what I would do with that. But if I had personally had cancer, I'd be looking at all the options available, and I'd be looking at parasitic infections as potential causes as well, and I'd be covering all bases, whether or not they're true. I'd use treatments to provide the least harm and a chance of return on it. I'm not a gambler.
And I think there's another thing that we've seen very much in the clinic, and we have seen cases of remission. The key underlying factor in all of those cases, they were all very, very different cases, was the mindset of the patient. The patient never believed for a second that this was going to be it. They never took on the belief process of what they were being told, what statistics they fell in, how long they were going to live. Their belief process was, this is just a lesson for me, it will be done, this is not the end. And that strong mindset, coupled with the discipline for both lifestyle changes and to work with a varying number of practitioners, has been what's pulled them through. And Dr. Teresa Talpak has done a really good presentation on plantedge.net.au. It's called Cancer, My Greatest Teacher, and she goes into the meditations and the actual daily practices that she does for herself that have allowed her to progress through her conditions.
Please raise your hand if you have another question. Come on.
Hello, my name's Tracy. There's two questions actually, but the one is for mental health you were talking about. So a lot of people in the aging population have got dementia, whichever type of dementia, and it seems to be so complicated. Somebody in my family, my mother's got frontal temporal lobe dementia, but she's not herself. She believes she's been possessed, and it's relentless. She doesn't stop from the minute she opens her eyes. Unfortunately, she's in South Africa, but they say it's medically okay there, but you don't know where to start with what to take and who to see. How do you start looking for a bit of help with that? And then the second thing is they had a suppository sort of exhibition in the street here yesterday, cannabis suppository. I know nothing about it, and there might be people who just like me were interested in when you'd use it and why.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question is about dementia, and the type of dementia you mentioned, temporal lobe dementia, does give you very strange symptoms. You can have very strange symptoms, character changes, strange outbursts. With dementia, by the time you've got end-stage dementia like that, it's really palliation. It's not going to bring that person back to any major level of cognitive function. You may get a little bit of a return, you'll definitely get some calmness, but really, in those sort of situations, I keep things very, very simple. I'll use a balanced oral medication, either a capsule or a gummy. I'll probably choose to have a little bit more CBD in that mix, so maybe 10 is to 25 sort of ratio. And the dosing level is really simple as well. It depends on the symptomatology of the patient, So when in the day they've got their main problem, so some people sleep well and have terrible daytime, the other way around sometimes. So we'll use that dosing at those periods to match with that, but keep it really simple, something like a half a gummy twice a day or a gummy twice a day, and that's it. And all we're really looking for there is some sleep usually, a reduction in anxiety. If the anxiety is a really severe problem, I'll probably have a bit more CBD in the mix. But agitation, there's always aches and pains and discomfort, which can be really hard to express when you're demented at all. So often that will come through as a poor behaviour when really you just got a sore belly, and you can't tell someone that. So that's the way I would handle dementia. And, in terms of getting some help there, you could start with your GP if they're into it, but really, I would come to someone who knows, come to someone like ourselves at PlantMed. Someone's got some experience in that area, because then it's going to be easy. Often you're educating your GP unless they're already doing it. So if your GP is aware and around it, yeah, great idea. But if not, someone's a bit more specialist, and our website is plantmed.net.au, and look that up. Give us a ring. We didn't bring any flyers because it's too disorganised, but check in with us, and it's a simple process like any doctor. Just ring, book in, and then we'll take care of the rest for you. But really simple. You go ahead.
You're saying your patients in South Australia, South Africa? Yes. So most importantly with older patients in particular is they are a falls risk. So wherever you actually source your medicinal cannabis from, you want to be very conscious that there is a good amount of CBD on board for an elderly patient, particularly as patients age, and if they're cannabis naive, they're very, very sensitive to THC. Blood pressure drops naturally at night time. So in an elderly patient, falls is one of the biggest concerns that we have. Just make sure that you've got plenty of CBD buffering whatever THC dose you're having, ideally at that ratio of 4:1. Which is where we generally sit in safe land with our elderly or child patients. But yeah, just remember, good amount of CBD on board, yeah.
Yeah, so if you wanted to start with your mum, you could get some gummies which would say 10 milligrams THC, 25 milligrams CBD, chop them into quarters, give her a quarter and see how she goes in the morning, give her a quarter, see how she goes at lunch, give her a half at night. If that's not strong enough, a half one. And that'd probably be all you need. You'd probably stop on the first level with her. But you don't want to try and fix everything, because you won't. And what was the second part?
Suppositories.
Oh, suppositories.
Right, yes.
Yeah, suppositories are a thing. I think they're very good for local work. Same with vaginal troches. I think they're good for local application. Theoretically, suppositories avoid the first pass metabolism of the liver, so you get better duration of action and reduced psychoactive effect, but that should still go through and be processed and get a psychoactive effect after. So I think they're good locally, but I don't think they're good systemically, because I feel like you need to have the noticeable effect of some sort to know that you're getting a systemic plasma level. If you're putting a big dose of THC up your backside and you don't have any feeling from it, are you getting that dose into you, or is it just dribbling back out again? So, it's something I would use if I had, say, a bum cancer, but I would also be using oral medication or inhaled medication as well. I'd be covering, once again, all bases, trying to, from all angles, as it were.
Please. Oh, here we go.
Hello. How do your patients navigate holding a driving licence? Can you take CBD, gummies, anything on a regular basis?
Good question. I mean, that is a real big hurdle for the whole of Australia. If we drop this stupid prohibition against driving when you're not impaired thing, I won't bother going into it because I'm sure you've talked about it, many topics this weekend. We got rid of that, there'd be 50% more patients tomorrow, because people are really scared about breaking the rules, about hurting themselves, about hurting someone else, about losing their licence. So with cannabis road testing, they only test for the THC component, so you can use CBD component at your will without it being testing positive. Most of the CBD products you'll get in Nimbin for sure are full spectrum, so they will contain a small amount of THC. The test that they do for driving is a roadside mouth swab, and if that fails, you go to do another swab, and if you fail that, I think they might even take you for a blood test if it's needed. The base rules in Australia everywhere except Tassie is no THC. So if any THC touches your mouth, there's a chance it'll stick there because THC is fat soluble, and there's a chance it will be detected. So all of our patients sign off on what we call a medical cannabis acknowledgement form, which says, I understand the road rules, I won't drive.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sorry,
there you go.
It's a really, really complex component. Unfortunately, the roadside drug testing rules in Australia will test for an impairment and not a trace. Trace, not impairment. So you could have actually consumed cannabis 6 weeks ago and you could still potentially test positive to a roadside drug test. So I'm all for a roadside drug test that is accurate and that will protect other drivers on the roads, but that is not what is taking place. The Dragar 3000 that does the roadside drug testing tests for every pharmaceutical imaginable, but that button is turned off. So your benzoates, your really heavy S8s, they're not testable despite the fact that there are people driving every day with these in their system. The hardest part about cannabis medicine is the patient needs to take responsibility themselves and be a responsible patient to their community. We do still have to educate people though. They can't drive when they're using cannabis medicines, but what if there was an emergency? What if they had to drive to hospital? Well, we do need to let people know impairment windows, and that's the most important thing with cannabis is you are actually impaired. If you inhale your cannabis, you will be impaired for 2 to 4 hours. If you ingest your cannabis, you will be impaired for 6 to 8. So in those timeframes, you will have effect on motor skill. So it's important not to drive at those times, but it's also important to outline to people when those motor skills aren't impaired, and if in an emergency they had to operate machinery, that's the windows in which they could do so safely. But in the clinic and within all aspects of medicinal cannabis, you can't drive while using medications that contain any form of THC.
So the way we get around it is, there's a couple of ways. One is you just don't care. Some people just don't care. They want to feel better, they want to be healthy, and they just don't care. That's one side. The other side is, I really care, I don't want to break any rules, so I'm going to use CBD only as an isolated medicine, which is often not that effective. The middle of the road is to use your oils and have the impairment windows, be aware of them so you're safe, but you take the risk when you drive. The other thing which can be done is to encapsulate your medicine. So you only use encapsulated medicine. You don't use oils, you don't use tinctures, you don't use gummies, you don't smoke or vape. You put your medicine inside the capsule, swallow the capsule. Nothing ever touches your mouth. A study done down in Sydney about 5 years ago by the Langford Initiative found out that if you did that, the chance of mouth swab detection was essentially 0%. Your blood level will still be up. If you tested your blood, your urine or a hair, it would show, but the mouth swab won't. So for people that are needing to medicate, are wanting to almost follow the rules, that will be the way to go because your chance of detection is almost 0. And then there are some mouthwashes. Good oral hygiene is obviously a good aspect. You brush your teeth and your tongue, you're going to reduce the chance of detection. And then there are some mouthwashes that are designed to make the test not work that well, that aren't guaranteed, or in Australia, or necessarily legal, or not illegal either. But they're not guaranteed to falsify that test, but have worked for a lot of our patients. So there's options there. Probably the best option would be to encapsulate only. Just use encapsulated medicines. So if you're looking for that medicinal effect, you just put them all in pills.
It's just a classic case of discrimination, unfortunately. We'll work with patients who polypharmacy patients, so anywhere up to 30 different pharmaceuticals consumed per day. And then as we reduce those medicines, now the patient can't drive despite being less impaired than they've ever been in the last 10 years. So it's it's a political question, it's discriminatory, and it's also designed so this space doesn't actually expand much past what it has. Once we lift those drug driving rules and we actually make some common sense out of it, we will see a lot more medicinal cannabis patients, but we're also going to see a drastic drop in pharmaceutical consumption as well, which is where the underlying issue is coming from.
Okay. I think we'll probably go with one more question because I can hear the parade starting to sort of warm up out there. So this lady here.
Sorry. Hey. Okay. My dad, who was here, but he's gone to catch up with the parade. He's got Parkinson's and something called MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome. and I've been looking into that, but I can't really get the right strains and the right treatment for that combination with cannabis stuff. He's old hippie. I think he was here the second year Nimbin was Nimbin. Yeah.
So with Parkinson's, you're really looking, you're looking at the symptomatology of that, and you're also looking at the lack of dopamine being produced, so you get these tremors and neurological deficits, and it's progressive. So by the time you've discovered Parkinson's, unfortunately, it's 90% damage has been done. The treatment of Parkinson's that you see on the classic videos, and I'm sure you've seen them if your dad's got that, is this guy has a little dab of this nice black stuff, and then 10 minutes later he's sipping on a cup of tea, like he wasn't shaking. So that in all realisticness is a fairly strong extract that he's just taken. Your dad being an old hippie is probably an advantage in this situation, because what I would do to treat him would be to use a high dose balanced oral product between CBD and THC, and provide that 3 times a day and titrate that up till we get control of his tremors, his pain, his spasticity, and that will kind of be it. Then you add on your inhaled cannabis, so you're getting a higher plasma level in the peak periods. He'd still be using his dopamine supporting medications from pharmaceutical medications because they will be helping, but you do get some dopamine receptor effect from THC and CBD, changing the way in which all those neurons are firing in the brain. And sort of the idea of the endocannabinoid system we all have is to bring our body systems back into balance. So in your dad's case, it's trying to get more dopamine to be fired. So he'll have a lot of expression of cannabinoid receptors around there, and he's already stimulating it with his cannabis, and he's sort of exhausted his endocannabinoids, but the level of function is still dropping. So it'll be that sort of more high dose oral medication. And, the high-dose CBD would also be giving him a neuroprotective effect to hopefully slow down the damage to the brain. So, yeah, I'd keep it like that. But, I have got quite a few Parkinson's patients, and usually they're not smokers because of the age group they're in. And it can be quite difficult to get that patient to a therapeutic dose range with the THC because they just can't handle it. They're like, no, too strong. It makes me feel weird. I feel anxious. I can't do that. So with your dad being an old stoner, it's probably to his advantage, and it's probably his dream come true when, his doctor says you've got to go and take as much cannabis as you can, please, until your tremor stops. Yeah.
Something a little bit left of centre and completely off the space of cannabis, but I love watching new scientific studies that are coming out. There's a lot of really interesting information in regards to Parkinson's and infrared light therapy on the stomach at the moment, so that's something I'd strongly suggest looking into. And I have seen some patients who've had some positive outcomes, not actual remission, but a better kind of day-to-day.
You've got the wrong machine, it doesn't focus deep
Yeah,
enough.
you need to get the expensiver one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need a powerful laser.
Yep.
Yeah, powerful laser.
AIH on the Gold Coast has a couple of really deep infrared machines, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for coming today and sharing your wisdom and your very extensive experience. John and Chloe Jean have been coming to MardiGrass for many years and sharing, so thank you again for coming along
thank you.
today.
And thank you, Kath. You are here every year doing all this. I know the emails, it's all you.
And
so thank you.